Hello everyone, welcome in. This is Spiral of Time. Happy December. I hope that the beginning of this month is treating each of you very well. I hope that everyone is feeling grounded, feeling alive, and feeling ready for this coming season. You know, we are making our way into Sagittarius season, which is a season of integration. And I wanted to get on here today just to give a little bit more into this pre-season energy, which I consider as the transition between Scorpio and Sagittarius season. If you watched my last video, you'd know that I talked a bit about the difference between sidereal and tropical astrology and tried to give a little bit of insight into what the sidereal calendar kind of tells us versus what the tropical calendar tells us. So if you watch that video, then you know that we are currently in Scorpio season, and we will still be in Scorpio season until December 16th. When I do most of my studies and these videos, I always look first to the sidereal calendar because it takes things a little bit deeper into what is really happening behind the scenes, because it looks to the night sky. And, you know, when we get into the world of night, we're able to see and connect to things that weren't necessarily just within our visual day-to-day kind of eyes. I feel as though the tropical calendar is a lot more about what we kind of generally see on like a day-to-day basis. It's less about what is behind the surface. So when the moon comes into the sky and illuminates the night sky, what is it that we're seeing? And I look to sidereal to just kind of get a picture of night. In that picture of night, which is, you know, one where we are illuminating ourselves within a dark space, gives us way into just our natural movements for the day. So if you're interested in any of my work, where I just kind of get deeper and probably in a lot clearer manner than I'm able to sometimes share when I come on here and speak. So yeah, if you're interested in that, you know, just let me know in the comment section down below, and I will, you know, guide you to some of my other works and whatnot. But to get into today's video, I wanted to talk about how we can prepare ourselves for the upcoming energy and for these stories that are unfolding within us right now. As we move towards winter season, you know, winter serves a different purpose for us than fall or spring or summer. And winter is a very icy season. So given that we are currently in sidereal Scorpio season, but tropically we are in Sagittarius season, we can look to both of these signs and determine how we can integrate these two energies. Like, what is the connection point that we need to make in order to really have a successful Sagittarius season for ourselves? And I was doing a lot of contemplating myself about this, as I am currently trying to decipher my own energies and understand what Sagittarius season is truly meant to be. And I had come across the idea of creating fire. So we know that Sagittarius is a mutable sign. And when I look to mutable energy, I look at it as something that we have to make. So for me, like, mutation is something that is made. So when we're looking to a mutable sign, we have to then kind of make that sign. I had spoke about in my How to Fix Scorpio video that Scorpio was a sign that needed to be fixed. So we had to figure out ourselves how to fix Scorpio. And then when it comes to the mutable signs, such as Sagittarius, we need to figure out how to create that mutation, create that fire. And that mutation in this case would be the fire. It's very different than fixed energy. So in looking towards this mutation, I figure that given we are in this transitionary period between Scorpio and Sagittarius, that maybe this time is meant for us to focus on how we're going to create fire, because we want to stay warm throughout winter. When I think of winter season, and I think of like when we really get into winter season, that's when we'll be in Capricorn energy. And Capricorn is a very icy sign. So Capricorn is earth, but it also is the sea goat. So it represents water as well. And it's saying that beneath the surface of earth, there is a lot of water. So it's really about getting through that ice and breaking through to the water in order to create that flow that we'll need for our Aquarius seasons. So you can kind of begin to see how the zodiac plays out this little bit of a story. And when we're looking to the story of the zodiac, we want to give ourselves insight into how we're going to keep our fire going through Sagittarius season into Capricorn season in order to make sure that we aren't getting stuck or just kind of looping ourselves out of the current path that we're on. So we don't want to burn out. We don't want to burn out, and we don't want to not have enough fire to make it through winter season. So I have been doing a lot of contemplating myself about how I can kind of create my own fire in my life. And I haven't quite found any solutions yet. To be like completely honest with y'all, I haven't necessarily found my solution. You know, I have mentioned before that I am still very new to this. This is not something that I have been in practice of for that long, but I am beginning to see how things are kind of playing out. And honestly, a few years ago, when I started thinking about doing this kind of work, I didn't even understand what it was that I was thinking about. And now a few years down the line, not only do I have a bit of inner understanding of it, I guess understanding, no, not only do I have like this kind of understanding of it all, but I'm also now putting what I thought into practice. And this for me is practice. And, maybe that is the solution. Maybe the solution, for myself, which maybe this is something that you can take from me and utilize in your own life, is that I had figured out what I kind of wanted to do. And now that I have done so, I'm trying to kind of create these paths around it, create these paths that don't put me in positions of burning out, which is something that I have experienced a lot of different times, is just going entirely too fast and then losing my fire. And there have also been times where I haven't had enough fire. So it's trying to find that balance of fire within us, which is really what Sagittarius season is about, to not necessarily, it's almost as if we need to find some kind of connection between our actions and then like our more passive energy. So allowing things to kind of create more of a flow. And that flow is our drive, it's our passion, it's our ambition. And it's about being very intentional and being smart about our ambitions, not pressuring ourselves into feeling as though we have to push into creation, but seeing how we can begin to slowly build that fire so that it almost stands on its own. And it's not something that we then have to work as hard towards on a day-to-day kind of life. So there's that. And a lot of this contemplation really led me to what this whole idea of creation is unfolding for not just myself, but for each of us as a collective. Because ultimately, you know, we are all in tune with the universe's energies. And it's more of a choice as to whether we want to follow what the universe has been signaling to us, or if we want to ignore it and kind of move in a different direction. So, you know, there are two sides that you can be on in terms of this spectrum. And it really puts us in the middle of two different worlds. We have the world of the institutionalized intellect, which I like to consider the very logical world. And then I feel as though we have the world of I guess the only word I have for it is spirituality, where it's just the complete opposite of what would be considered as logic. And it's like looking into these two different windows and trying to bring them together, which is the integration. Because, you know, Sagittarius is a sign of wholeness. It is a sign of divine wisdom. And, you know, wisdom is I like to consider wisdom a circle of knowledge, because it just shows us how really circular everything truly is. And when we begin to see those circular patterns, those spirals of time, once we have, you know, a deeper understanding into that, we then kind of have what Capricorn is looking for. So every time that Sagittarius season comes around, we're able to see just a bit more of that picture, just a bit more of that wholeness that we need to bridge our spiritual to our material reality, to bridge our intellect, our institutionalized intellect, to our occult and ethereal knowledge that we receive from the divine. And I believe that these two things are connected in more ways than we actually realize. And part of what I want to do with this channel and whatnot is to really just to give a window into how both of these things are connected, and how they actually depend on one another to keep the circulation going, to keep things flowing. And for me, I find it to be a very beautiful process. I think that it can at times be a bit like it can be a lot at times, because, you know, when you're looking into like two different worlds of thought, there are a lot of truths. Like there are a lot of, this is the truth, this is the way, like this is how it is, and it can't be any other way. So I feel as though when I'm able to kind of move within both of those worlds and not necessarily view them as like solid, defined, kind of concepts and whatnot, I can just kind of see them for what they are, as part of something else, and not necessarily something that stands alone, but something that has to kind of stand together. And that standing together is, you know, is the integration. It's the coming together of two things that are whole on their own. They come together to make, I guess, a third, which would really be three, because, you know, when we look to numerology, 3 is all about creativity. So when we think about what creativity, or like what creation and stuff really is, I guess it's technically two whole things that are coming together. And the combination of these two whole things would essentially make the number 3, which not only, you know, it's a way in which like numbers can also kind of be seen through this, because I feel like numbers kind of give us a yeah. So 2 whole things make 3. and 3 is the creation. So it's like during this season of mutation, of mutable fire, how are we creating 3? What 2 things are we looking towards that are going to create our fire and to keep our fire? And it's not something that necessarily is to be rushed. It's not to say that if you don't have your flow of creation down right now, that you're not going to have a steady base for Sagittarius season or for Capricorn season, but it's really about looking to what is going to create our base of fire. What are we building our fire on right now? So we recognize that we have this emotional platform. I talked a lot about becoming the King of Cups during Scorpio season. And now that we have this platform, we want to transform our waters into fire. And we have to figure out how to make that transformation within each of us. The other day, I was recording a video about just my kind of flowing through creation and what that looks like for me, and how I can sometimes get a little bit lost in this world, because when I look to these 2 different things, it's like one requires me to be very business focused and the other one requires me to be a true being of creativity, where I have to allow the magic of creativity to flow through me in order to be able to see like the spiritual truths. So as I'm looking at these 2 things, at the world of logic, the world that is business, the world that requires me to have some kind of structured grounding, some way of making something, I'm looking to how I can utilize my magic, my creativity to make that world work for me. And it's coming from a deeper place within myself, and that's something that each of us have to learn and that we each have to connect to on our own. You know, I feel as though there are a lot of teachings and stuff out there. And when I think about like this kind of work, I don't want to consider myself as someone who is trying to like preach or to lecture or to impose my ideas onto anybody within the collective. That's not necessarily my function or my purpose here. I more so am trying to function as just a being who reveals these kind of cycles, and these, revelations that I've received from these cycles have come from me just having such opposition and being within both worlds and looking at both things and being like utterly confused. Like, there have been times where I just have completely not understood what it is that I was looking at, because these 2 things, they appear to be so different, but in actuality, they're one and the same. So as I'm looking to how to create and I'm trying to figure out how to build this fire now, one thing that I've really realized is being able to look at both things and trying to find their similarities, and not necessarily looking at them as opposites, but looking at them as something that is one. Because then it makes me assume that 3 is also the number 1. And it's like these 2 things, they're the same. So they are 1, but then they are also 3. Because these 2 things, they stand on their own, and when they come together, they are creation. They are number 3, but they are number 1 as well. So it's really just, Sagittarius season is going to be one where, the philosopher within us can kind of come out and can kind of begin thriving. It can begin connecting our mind to different modes of thought that we may not have necessarily considered before. It can connect us to different contemplations. And when we are looking at these contemplations, not with a an eye of criticism, but more of an eye of actually trying to understand the relational aspects of the two things, we can then see exactly what Sagittarius wants us to see. And what we have to find during Sagittarius season is the story that was meant for each of us. We have to find our rising story. And our rising story is what begins to come through during Sagittarius season. So every time we cycle through to Sagittarius season, we begin to see the rising. The rising is that bringing of fire. Okay, it's that fire that melts the ice. It's getting through those layers. And when we're thinking about this ice, it's not something that is happening, like on just an outside level. You have to think that ice is what is underground. So when you're thinking of melting something underground, what you're really melting through, you're melting through the water. So in order to get through the water, it's almost, you have to ask yourself, how do I get through these thick blocks of ice? How do I get them to not be so stagnant and to turn them into water during this winter season? It's the story of fire and ice. What is our story of fire and ice? That is all what winter is about. And when we allow ourselves to do that work and to look to that work, not necessarily for, again, as I said, not to criticize ourselves, but to really just, it's almost as if you have to, like, getting through the ice is a journey of compassion. It's a journey of seeing things from a perspective that completely takes like yourself and your feelings almost out of the journey. I think during winter season, we can get stuck in our own traumas, stuck in our own pain. And when we get stuck there, we're unable to see the beauty of what that pain is actually trying to tell us. We're unable to see how everything that has happened to us has happened divinely. And it can be a harsh reality to have to kind of crash yourself into. And it's something that is taking me, like I said, I've had these kind of ideas for a few years now, but it's not something that I thought I understood until now. There was a point in time, it was during maybe 2021, December 2021 into like January 2022. I thought that I was stuck in that world of pain because I had gotten through so much of my ice. And this ice is something that does not just melt in one season. And I want to make that very clear. When this ice is melting, sometimes you only get through certain layers of the ice within that season. And then you have to wait for the season to come back around to get through to the next layer. And these are things that begin to build and build and build upon each other. So the melting is not something that's just, in 2 months, it's all melted. In 2 months, it is gone. No, sometimes it can take a very, very, very long time. It can take a couple of years, maybe even longer, depending on what you have gone through and what you really have to get through and what you have to retune your mind into, the perspective of how you see things. It's about how you come in and you change your perspective, and that change of perspective is what allows that channel to flow, the channel of water to flow. And we want to, creating that flow of channel, that water channel now is what takes us into our spring, is what brings the sprouting of spring It's what brings us into our Taurus, which is something that I've also been talked about. In my last video, I titled it, I believe like Discovering Taurus or something, Beneath the Surface Face, the Bridge to Material. And this is all what is kind of coming around right now. But I think that one thing that is happening on a more major scale is that this kind of awakening that we're hearing a lot of divine beings talk about, that's happening right now, is that I feel like a lot of us have gone through these deep journeys of melting those things within us. Because whether you are a Capricorn or not, we all have some kind of layers of ice. Some may be thicker than others. Some may not have as much. So it may be easier for them to make things flow. But, you know, another way that you can look at it is sometimes, you know, it can be a blessing to have had so many adversities within your life. And I have had to see how my adversities, which felt like they were holding me back, which made me feel as though I was getting stuck in something, how all of those adversities have led me to where I am now. And that just goes to show that where I am now is not the final destination. It's only the beginning of what is to come. And that is something that is the same for each of us, for all of you out there as well. You know, so it can be a little bit tricky, but the energies right now within the universe, you know, there's some kind of alignments that are happening that are really like transitioning. Also, I was speaking about, you know, how we're entering into the age of Aquarius, and we're kind of moving from the age of Pisces. Aquarius is a constant kind of flow of water. So it's almost as if this preparation that is happening, which is also being supported now and like really guided by the universal energies, are really trying to move us into these new flows. And that's why you see like a lot of new people coming into the scene, new platforms, new voices, new faces, you know, new words. All of this that is coming in is the I almost kind of want to, like, the only words that I can think to describe it is almost as if prophecy is like, it's as if prophecy is being written. And I'm not sure that I have any better way of explaining what that kind of means right now. But I do recognize that what is happening, and it is creating a new way of life. What is being built right now for all of us, for those who are at the point of their divine awakening, who are coming to realize their own like personal connection with the divine. That is creating a massive awakening, and it's happening on a massive scale. I'm seeing it like a lot all over the internet, of course. And not only that, I'm feeling it within the actual earth. Like, it feels as though the connection that we kind of have to the natural world, to Mother Earth, is coming back to us. It feels like that memory is being restored. And it feels like maybe that's the age of what the prophecy, I know it's such like prophecy, but like the age of like what the prophecy and stuff is kind of all about, is about this coming back to earth, you know, about the divine beings like actually coming back to their bodies, coming back into connection, coming back into the grounding forces that are keeping us planted in earth, that are allowing us to be rooted deeply within the soils of the earth. And that connection is one that, you know, it cannot be broken. So for me, this looks like a lot of different things, and it can have a lot of different ways to different people, but it's a new way of sustainability. And it's about recognizing how the ways in which we have behaved in the past and how we have destroyed the natural world can no longer be. It's about finding new, inventive ways to create more in tunely with nature and to connect technology in a way that doesn't necessarily destroy our environment, but allows us to actually create some kind of ecosystem. It's a whole new way of design. It's an entire new plan. It's the plan that is currently being written. And not only does it have to do with like the infrastructure and industry and engineering, it has a lot to do with art and that whole world. Because when we're looking at like different creations, we can just see how a lot of things are just very destructive, extremely destructive. And what it does is it takes away from what is in order to create something new. When in actuality, we shouldn't be taking away from what is. We should be finding a way to live within what is. And it's like, that is what, in my, opinion, is what kind of we're supposed to be seeing on a more holistic level during the Sagittarius season, is really how to live within the world without destroying it. And, and figuring out like, okay, so boom, now I have solutions. And this is something that I'm going to take back to myself too and actually contemplate on. But what I'm thinking about right now is that as we as individuals, as humans who are just living, living our best lives out here, how can we live our lives more in tune with nature? I think about the products that we use. I think about the foods that we consume. I think about how we utilize technology in our life. And I think about how we live, how we consume energy, electricity, water usage. Like, I feel like all these different things on, within like smaller levels within us that we can do to just make our lives more sustainable. Like learning how to grow our own food doesn't mean you have to have a whole farm or a backyard. Like, well, how can you do that in the place that you are? I feel like it's about learning to repurpose things and to make things work and to kind of to return things to a simpler state, because the simpler state of being almost feels as though it better supports the life force, like our life force and the earth in and of itself. So in my personal little opinion over here, that's kind of what I feel like the rising story that's happening. And then, on a more internal level, it's about moving ourselves from places of traumas and pains, because, we think about that a lot of connecting within the natural world has to do with our broken connection to our emotions, because that broken connection takes us away from our humanity. And when you receive your humanity again, you kind of receive that divine connection to the earth, and you then receive that emotive kind of like resonance that allows you to feel what you think as though that you may not always feel. It's removing that kind of numbness that holds us in not being able to see like that the natural world is hurting, that the earth is hurting, that the mother is hurting. And when we can't see and we can't connect to to the mother and her pain and her hurt, we end up just destroying her. And then that destruction turns her into what's the word? I guess the dark mother, we would call it. It turns her into the dark mother, and she becomes destructive. She becomes destruction. And then we have war, and you know, not just literal war. The earth begins also warring against us for our actions, for what we have done to her. So I feel like a lot of that, all of it is connected in a way that we aren't necessarily always thinking about. And part of what we're supposed to be thinking about within Sagittarius season is not just like, is really getting into our own emotional journey and learning how to flow through that so that we keep that stable connection to the earth. And yeah, so that's a little bit into like preparing for winter season and some things to contemplate on, to think about, you know. Oh, and I also wanted to mention that within like the Rising's story, which is the title of this video, we can almost see how each of our rising signs, like, it's a bit of learning how to connect it back to the whole. So it's learning how to sustain your rising sign and kind of like what that stability looks like for it. So as an example, let's talk about, maybe I'm being called to mention Gemini risings. And when we think of Gemini, we know Gemini is all about communication. And communication is not just about like how we are communicating with one another, but it's about opening ourselves to communication back to the earth. So part of, you know, if you're looking at it about Gemini energy, you'd be looking to open up those portals of communication, to be able to listen and to understand, to comprehend what it is the earth is trying to tell you, and then communicating that to the people. So creating that kind of cycle of communication, because each rising sign is about learning how to create those different cycles. So just, you know, a little example, not a deep dive, y'all, into Gemini risings or anything, but it would be learning to communicate your own emotions like within yourself and kind of opening that up to be able to open up to these other forms of communication, like communication with animals and yada, 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 like stuff kind of like that. So yeah, that's a little bit about Sagittarius season, a little bit about winter, a little bit about this current pre-season of transition between Scorpio and Sag. So if you have any questions or any comments, feel free to